Mr. Saktiandi.
Is a broadly inclusive and caring and positive budget for all. There is generous healthcare support for Singaporeans with chronic illnesses. The Merdeka generation gets additional healthcare benefits, among other perks. Low-income salary workers have an increased income cap and enhanced workfare bonus. The bicentennial bonus brings additional monetary perks for the different groups of Singaporeans, and there are personal income tax rebates for all. It is also a budget to chart a steady course in uncertain times and prepare for the future. Indeed, restructuring is the key to doing well in the future economy, and this budget builds on the principles and the key features of past budgets to improve the lives of all Singaporeans. Mr. Speaker, sir, maybe in Malay, a short Malay in response to what Mr. Faisal Mainab mentioned just now about aging. So dari segi penuaan masyarakat Singapura untuk generasi merdeka, selain cadangan yang Encik Faisal Mainab telah katakan, bajet yang kita adakan untuk tahun 2019 telah juga mengadakan berbagai package lah untuk warga senja dan juga warga mereka dan keluarga mereka yang sudah menua. Itu termasuk top up pension card yang telah diberikan di dalam bajet ini. Jadi ada pelbagai package untuk mereka yang sudah usia senja di dalam bajet ini juga, melainkan apa-apa yang telah dicanangkan untuk Encik Faisal Mainab. Jadi dari segi bajet ini, selain Merdeka Generation Package dan PG yang telah kita keutarakan, ada juga active aging activities yang activity aging untuk warga-warga senja yang telah dikelolakan oleh masyarakat, oleh kerajaan dan juga pemerintah untuk jangka masa panjang. In English, please, Mr. Speaker. In the last decade, our expenditure has grown correspondingly to the population's needs, and it will only keep growing. We will have to fund our needs in a fiscally sustainable way to achieve all our objectives. Otherwise, future generations of Singaporeans will suffer. The best way to go about this is to continue growing the economy, keep a broad-based tax, have a diverse source of revenue, and maintain fiscal prudence. I note that for this year's budget, the government has taken a counter-cyclical approach by introducing multifaceted measures to boost competitiveness, productivity, and to upskill and reskill and right-skill workers. Despite going from a surplus of $2.1 billion or 0.4% of GDP in FY 2018 to a deficit of $3.5 billion in FY 2019. So it is indeed a generous and ambitious budget, in my opinion, with special transfers rising to about $15.3 billion, up from the $9 billion in FY 2018. This is the highest special transfer on record, above the $12.4 billion in budget 2014, when the PG package was unveiled. And certainly, we have to be ambitious in the face of many challenges. Arguably, the most ambitious dimension that this budget and many to follow has to address pertains to daunting socio-economic challenges derived from rapidly growing demographics and inequality. Of the two, inequality is a multidimensional and complex problem that needs to be examined more closely. The Finance Minister's allusion to social mobility is a critical precondition to tackle this problem. To be sure, by definition, one of the main purposes of the budget is clearly redistribution. This means that in recognizing the economic realities of uneven distribution of resources, fiscal policy is meant to facilitate a slightly more equitable redistribution of resources across the economy. So we are seeing further enhancements to fiscal transfer packages such as the ComCare long-term assistance and workfare income supplement, alongside longer-term commitments such as the $6.1 billion Merdeka Generation Package and $5.1 billion in long-term care support initiatives to form a vital safety net. But we must go beyond to address the true underlying causes of inequality. Short-term redistribution of wealth is not only unhelpful for future generations, it inadvertently increases social tensions when it devolves into a zero-sum game of tug-of-war between the haves and the have-nots. Already some people are asking, can you do more for the middle-income group? What about those who don't have jobs? They can't even benefit from WIS. So these are perfectly valid concerns. But there are other long-term measures to address this. After all, the ultimate goal of inclusive fiscal policies is not merely some variant of Robin Hood type of social transfers. Instead, a holistic approach to inequality is incomplete without the ecosystem of measures and programs to improve social mobility, which is a far more potent catalyst of socio-economic progress than welfare. To this end, there is a repletion of programs to serve every need, from individuals to businesses, children to elderly. Kickstart, global ready infrastructure talent, Skills Future, Adapt and Grow, Professional Conversion Program or PCP, Career Guidance and Counselling are just a few of the available programs one can tap on. Built upon the pre-existing system of high-quality, heavily subsidized public education, this will improve one's chances of climbing up the career ladder or economic ladder. Next point that I have is but the schemes are actually merely the start of a long journey on battling inequality, a pervasive problem across many developed countries. So one can reasonably expect that further enhancements in coming budgets will be inevitable. So most of the time, the focus has been on the vertical dimension of inequality between the rich and the poor. And the budget is one good example where we tax the better off ones and we distribute to the needy segments, hopefully well distributed. But there are important horizontal dimensions as well. So in the Gini coefficient or top 1% income share, people appear anonymously. But we may be concerned with how unequal income is across various groups, such as by gender, location, or even ethnicity. So this budget and previous budgets have aimed to address these horizontal dimensions in various ways. But I feel more can be done to address some of these horizontal dimensions. Earlier I mentioned about the generational, but now in terms of social and educational dimensions, to narrow gaps as much as we can. One way to narrow gaps in terms of social and educational dimensions is to increase spending on the ITE segment of the student population. We already have a very established system for the conventional post-secondary route consisting of JCs and polytechnics. So enhancements in the IT education program is something more recent, so we will have to focus more to continue enhancing it. This segment constitutes 25 to 30% of the post-secondary cohort each year, and is a significant future labour force with key skill sets for us to be future ready. I note that despite the myriad of financial assistance programs available for IT students, poor time management and prioritizing of resources is one reason for some students to fall behind in their studies. For example, I know of a young boy who worked 2 jobs while studying because of financial woes in the family. He doesn't blame his lack of finances, but he regrets his poor time management, which has effectively rendered his 2 years in IT as a waste of time because he skipped classes. Last I'm aware, he was working hard on his internship, hoping to do well enough to improve his GPA and qualify for entry into the polytechnic. So I think there are many such students who are at their young age feel lost, entered IT as a last resort, and squandered away their time and resources. So by the time they recognize the opportunities and potential provided by the school, it is a bit late. So I hope a proactive approach can be taken to counsel students, particularly new admissions, teach them how to manage time resources, help them to apply for the necessary financial help, and follow up with the progress. This hands-on approach would need extra manpower resources and skilled ones at that. I've also heard anecdotally that a rising number of special needs students are admitted to IHLs, in particular ITEs, to further their education and obtain gainful employment upon graduation. This is a good sign and trend, but can we allocate more resources to the ITE to help enhance the Special Educational Needs or SEN Support Office? These students account for about 4% of ITE's enrollment. In fact, on average, over the last 3 decades, about 2,500 students with SEN or special educational needs were enrolled in the IHLs, and how many of these students were able to graduate and take on fulfilling work on their own terms? Can we do more to increase SEN student enrollment in IHLs, particularly in the ITEs, as some have demonstrated potential for vocational studies? Every student matters in a country where labour force growth is low. In Malay, Mr. Speaker, Singapura adalah sebuah negara kecil dengan pasaran kecil, tetapi kami berada dalam kedudukan yang baik untuk penyelidikan, inovasi dan peluang perniagaan pada skala serantau dan global. Kami mempunyai banyak perkongsian global dan serantau dan kami juga mempunyai reputasi yang baik untuk perkhidmatan yang cekap dan boleh dipercayai. Ia masuk akal bagi penduduk dan pekerja Singapura untuk meneroka ke luar negara untuk mencari kejayaan. Dengan berbuat demikian, mereka juga boleh mewujudkan lebih banyak pekerjaan dan peluang untuk warga Singapura yang lain. Saya juga dengan sukacita menyatakan bahawa Menteri telah berjanji bahawa lebih banyak lagi akan dilakukan untuk mempersiapkan dan membangunkan rakyat Singapura untuk merebut peluang untuk kerjasama antarabangsa dan untuk menyediakan lebih banyak peluang bagi warga Singapura mendapatkan pengalaman bekerja di luar negara. Terdapat program bakat infrastruktur yang siap global, GRID, di bawah PCP yang bertujuan untuk menghidupkan semula penukar kerjaya di kalangan profesional tempatan dan berpindah untuk memulakan fungsi pekerjaan diperlukan untuk projek-projek infrastruktur global di bidang seperti penasihat transaksi, pembiayaan projek, penasihat undang-undang dan kejuruteraan infrastruktur. Menteri juga telah mendedahkan rancangan untuk lebih banyak pembiayaan untuk pelajar di IHL yang merancang untuk bekerja di luar negara dengan firma-firma Singapura. Juga mendapat manfaat ialah firma Singapura yang berpotensi tinggi yang akan menerima sokongan untuk menghantar pekerja tempatan mereka untuk posting di luar negara. Jadi program bakat global atau Global Ready ini mempunyai premis yang baik dan saya berharap ia dapat diperluas untuk memasukkan peletakan serantau dalam pelbagai sektor yang lebih luas dan memasukkan penukar kerjaya pertengahan yang mungkin tidak mahu meninggalkan industri mereka sepenuhnya tetapi ingin mencuba pasaran yang berbeza. Dengan menggalakkan warga Singapura untuk merebut peluang untuk meneroka terutamanya di rantauan ASEAN, ini juga akan membantu memudahkan kerjasama di rantau ASEAN yang memberi manfaat kepada ekonomi. Dengan sukacitanya, saya ingin berkongsi tentang beberapa peniaga Melayu Muslim kami yang berjaya di rantau ini. Positano Risto datang dengan cadangan unik restoran halal Itali mereka pada tahun 2017 di Singapura dan sejak itu mereka membuka outlet tambahan di KL, Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Adriana Yarika telah membuat pakaian sederhana dengan unsur moden dan tradisional untuk lelaki dan wanita Melayu sejak tahun 2014 dan mereka telah mengembangkan perniagaan mereka ke Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Satu lagi, Enercon Engineering Private Limited yang khusus dalam penyelesaian kawalan kuasa mempunyai pejabat di Singapura dan Filipina dan menyokong perniagaan di Malaysia dan Taiwan. Ada banyak lagi, umpamanya Jumain Satisfaction telah menyebar sayap ke negara Jepun dalam perkilanan makanan dan juga bersaflit dalam sektor penyelesaian pengurusan pengangkutan teknologi. Jadi seperti anda lihat, Malaysia juga adalah pilihan yang popular untuk pengembangan bisnes kerana bukan sahaja mereka dekat dan mempunyai penduduk Islam yang besar, tapi juga kerana apabila perniagaan tempatan membuat kemajuan di satu negara, mereka membuka jalan bagi perniagaan Singapura yang lain. Melalui rangkaian dan perkongsian pengalaman di kalangan perniagaan yang berkembang ke negara yang sama, mereka dapat membantu antara satu sama lain untuk berkembang. Mr. Speaker, next I want to talk quickly about helping small savers to grow their income. The debate about distribution of wealth and inequalities tends to focus on large fortunes at the top, but the redistribution of wealth is as much about the encouragement of small savings at the bottom as it is about the restriction of the excesses at the top. So it is just as important to encourage small savings at the bottom rather than harping on restriction of the excesses at the top. So the rich get richer because they have ample funds to invest, benefit from the high interest rates and grow their portfolios and assets. The low income has less money to risk and some also lack the financial savviness. One suggestion is to address the current low interest rate environment. CPF offers relatively high interest rates for members, but not all have sufficient money in their accounts to take advantage of it. Moreover, this money is not to be freely withdrawn, so hesitation to deposit more money in the accounts is to be expected. I hope the government in future will consider offering a national savings bond with a guaranteed positive real rate of interest on savings with a maximum holding per person. The government could consider allocating a minimum $500 allocation of the existing Singapore savings bond to every Singaporean adult. The high interest rates would motivate people to save up without restricting the use of funds in times of need. This could also raise awareness about the positive characteristics of the Singapore savings bond to the general public. Even as we discuss the possible enhancements for the various schemes and future budgets, we cannot avoid the increasingly urgent question of how to sustainably fund all these efforts. I note that the Minister has plans for huge infrastructure projects and other infrastructure investments to be partly funded through borrowing and embedded government guarantees. I applaud this approach, as I have expressed my suggestions on this in my previous budget response last year, to ensure intergenerational equity. It is important to make sure intergenerational burden is allocated properly to the generation benefiting from the large infra projects. However, when planning a long-term project, be it infrastructure or social, I think it is important to follow individual lifetimes. The future is unpredictable, and there may be significant inequality between generations. Just because the real incomes are rising over time does not necessarily mean that those born later enjoy higher lifetime incomes. Inflation, increased cost of living and so on could have a major impact on livelihoods. In fact, researchers from the National Bureau of Economic Research, along with economists from Stanford University, Harvard University and Berkeley, presented financial reports, and comparisons indicate that millennials are doing worse off than the parents. So in the UK and USA, there is growing observation of millennials living with their parents because they cannot afford their own homes. This appears to be a trend in developed economies. Thankfully, we do not have such issues here in Singapore, but governments have the tendency to apply a social discount rate to long-term projects. So part of it reflects the expectation that future generations will be better off, and so a lower valuation is attached to the better off when measuring inequality at a point in time. So as the economic situation in various developed economies has reflected, this is a dangerous mindset, and we have to steer clear of. We risk increasing income inequality for the future generations otherwise. The matter of taxes is also something to contemplate while on the topic of intergenerational equity. As an aging population that is gearing towards automation, the amount of income taxes collected is expected to decrease along with the number of people in the workforce. What happens if the taxable population remains low? Do we keep increasing the taxes? That is a huge burden for future generations to bear, especially if they are not doing so well. So it is important that we examine whether these additional taxes will enhance or deteriorate the progressivity of the overall tax framework, especially for the lowest income households. Some sort of wealth-based tax may be more pertinent, and we could have different tiers of taxes. For example, impose 10% tax on purchase of goods in the luxury tier, or fine dining at a restaurant, and a much lower tax like 3% on basic necessities like rice. So increase tax rebates for social causes. So instead of paying taxes, the wealthy may choose to donate to causes they care about. To sum up, Mr. Speaker, Budget 2019 manages the tough and delicate balancing act of being sufficiently counter-cyclical, appropriately strategic, and unwaveringly committed to tackling structural challenges posed by the aging and economic transformation. Looking forward, we should continue focusing on increasing social mobility and measured tax solutions to resolve the inequality problem. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill. I support the budget. Thank you.